All right, you're up.
South America, but
Okay, well, good evening all. Welcome to the March 18th meeting of the Growth Planning Committee. Hope you all had a happy St. Patrick's Day yesterday. We'll start off as normal with the introduction of members.
Tom Smith,
Jane Evelyn.
Dan Saunders,
Ann Martin.
Galen Weibly, support staff.
Nadia Crockett Current, support staff.
okay, thank you. First on our agenda is approval of minutes. I'm not sure we had minutes. You guys played a game.
I can't remember if someone had taken minutes at the very beginning or not.
Was Liz here? Liz was here, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
No,
No, she wasn't
so
here.
last minute cancellation.
Yeah, I don't think there were minutes.
Yeah. So how did the game go? I think we could just do a verbal.
I thought it was good.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to see it.
It was excellent.
Was it?
You did a great job.
Excellent. So it'll be a good learning tool for our
Oh, yeah.
folks to get involved in.
Multiple ages, yeah.
Excellent. And Matt, you gotta bring a little one with you to help you with the Legos, right?
Yep.
Okay,
It was good feedback.
Good deal.
Appreciate it.
all right, so we'll go right to the second one, which is continued discussion on agritourism and agritainment. So I will turn it over to you, Galen. Sort
All
of
right.
Get us through.
So you all should have the memo that was prepared by staff yesterday for you. Just as a refresher, you know, we gave you definitions for what's agritourism, what's agritainment, what are we trying to do here. Our intent is we've heard from some folks who have expressed interest in having you know, special events and other types of things on their property that have farming interest of some sort. Farming operation, and so as to help supplement their income from the uncertainty of cultivation and raising livestock. It's been a trend that's been occurring where people have had wedding venues and there's been hay rides and other types of activities that are not necessarily related to the general function of what agriculture is in the cultivation of crops and raising of livestock. And so staff has done a little bit of research, and we've asked, there were some questions that were provided by the GPC members after the meeting, and I'd like to go over that with you. And then we can just open up for discussion at that point. So one of the questions that was asked is, in order to be eligible to participate for the farmstead exemption, for this use, there was discussion that maybe the farm should be in a working farm for 10 years. So staff said that's a good suggestion, but how would we enforce a permitted use that's been in existence maybe longer, or it's something that normally goes through like a planning board process. So that's just something to think about when you want to discuss this, is when it's a permitted use, we don't normally, the code enforcement officer doesn't sign something saying this is a okay thing. People just do it.
Committed to do it.
That's, yeah. So that's just something to think about. Next question was, if an eligible farm is sold, the eligibility does not pass to the new owner until the new owner has continued the farm and working farm for a minimum of 2 years. That was a condition that was thought to be added. Again, I think what we're looking here is this is a conditional use. We would not have this as a permitted use. So what's
recording in progress?
So what's a conditional use? A conditional use is where it goes in front of the planning board, and it has to go through a review process of performance standards that are set in Chapter 240, and then there's maybe additional conditions that are placed on by the planning board. One of the conditions that is placed in the findings of facts by the planning board is that if there's any transfer in ownership, that it's at least notified and detailed to the planning board to make sure that the operations are going to continue in the same manner as what was done in the past. So I think that's a reasonable expectation that we would have moving forward. I wouldn't be too concerned about them continuing to farm it for another 2 years, because that would be one of the conditions I think we would have, that it has to be continuing a farming practice. Right. You can't just decide 1 year, I'm going to stop farming and just do events. Like, that's not the intent. So we just need to make sure that the performance standards are there. But I'm not too concerned with ownership transfer, because that's a normal practice that happens in our town. The next question was, should we have some restrictions on produce that is being farmed by not allowing marijuana. That was one of the examples. And I said that the town's Chapter 252 would already control this scenario from taking place. So Chapter 252 is your marijuana ordinance that the town has opted not to be in any kind of medical or recreational marijuana. And so that is our position. We're not changing that. That should hold regardless of what someone wants to farm on their property. And we would enforce that to the greatest extent of the law. Next question that was asked by a GPC member. Do the three mentioned farms get real estate tax breaks under the farm and open space tax law? So I did reach out to the assessor on this one. There are 13 parcels that are in the tree growth and 5 in the farmland parcels. And then some farms do not take advantage of the farmland exemption. And I listed all the properties that the town staff has notified that are considered farms. What we would think of as they have some sort of public site or some public-facing entity, or they take advantage of the farmland tax exemption program. And so those are listed there for you. You have Black Rock Farms off Goose Rocks Road. There's a Christmas Tree Farm off Log Cabin or North Street, whichever one you want to use the term for. Rocking Horse Stables is off Arundel Road. You have the Blueberry Hill Farm off Log Cabin or North Street. And then 5 Acre Farm stand off Bryant Lane. So those are your farms that are currently in town. That was something that people asked about. Then the other question was, would a faux farm get similar tax breaks? And so what the GPC member was mentioning by a faux farm is like they have the facade that they're being a farm, but they're not really farming or having a regular farming operation. They're just saying, we're a farm, but then we're just doing special events. So that question was answered that as long as they're meeting the state definition, they could apply for farmland exemption with the tax assessor. And so we provide that bulletin reference for you. They have to generate more than $2,000 in annual income from farming activities. And I believe there was an acreage of like 5 acres that had to be farmed. So that's the general criteria. I mean, if anyone on this board wants to, raise rabbits or have a blueberry farm or something in your house and you meet those criteria, you could also go to the tax assessor and do the same thing.
How long has the $2,000 monetary amount been in effect?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. That's a state.
Oh, is it state?
Yeah, that's a state.
Because you would think that with inflation, maybe over time that goes up. I don't know. But,
yeah, the state of Pennsylvania has a $10,000 gross income. I don't know why Maine's is $2,000. That's a very low threshold. A lot of people could qualify for that if they just say, this is what we're doing. And again, this is only exemption off the land value. It's just giving it a different assessment for that acreage. It's not giving them like a 0 or anything. They still have to pay, but it's a reduced amount. But yeah, that's a state question.
But the income that produced by the farm has to be a net 2,000?
Yes, gross. Yeah.
Gross.
Gross 2,000.
Yeah.
That's pretty low.
So there was state land sizes could be a guidance for us. That was a question that was asked. Or we could require the owner to be in the farm timber scheme to be eligible for anything for anything that would come up. So I said yes, and we did provide a parcel breakdown, which I'll go over in a little bit. To say, that could be a condition that we add, but I will advise that, again, as we mentioned before, with the number of farms that you have in town, some of them aren't taking advantage of it. It's just the paperwork, they just feel like it's not worth it for them to just go to the assessor and do it. So I don't know if that's necessarily a prerequisite. And it's such a low bar with the 2,000,
So are there more than 5 farms in, or just 5 who are assessed?
There's 5 that are 5 farmland parcels that are getting the exemption.
Okay, but
Because
presumably
some
more
farms
than-
have multiple parcels.
But more than 5 farms, presumably. Could be.
Correct. Where is that here? Are there currently any real estate tax abatements in Kennebunkport in support of agricultural activities? And I said yes about the farmland tax exemption for eligible properties. That's the only tax exemption that's offered. And again, I went over that a little bit. It depends on what that use is for that farm. And I did talk to the tax assessor. They do verify, whatever that person's growing or raising, that they do go out and make sure that that person's doing what they said they're doing. And then if the property is rented by a non-owner for the summer, and I think this question came up at the end of our meeting that we discussed the agritourism. So if a wedding is on site, and then for the purposes of the family wedding, does this trigger any non-commercial versus commercial issues because of the extended duration of the lease? So I think what this was referring to was if a short-term rental license holder rents out the property and that family that rents it decides to have their wedding, in the house or out on the, backyard, is that going to trigger something for commercial use? And so staff has determined that this would not trigger a commercial issue if by happenstance the non-owner rents the property and decides to have a wedding or a party at their rental in compliance with the good neighbor guidelines for an STR. So think birthday party, anything else. We're not going to make them say this is now an event venue. It's incidental. It's not something that is being advertised abruptly that this is our wedding event venue. You're renting it as a short-term rental for people to vacation and enjoy our beaches here in Kennebunkport. Additional permits might be required, so for mass gathering or a tent permit if they want to put a tent permit or if it's over 250 people, which again, those permits do require additional administrative review by the code enforcement officer, police department, and fire department for public safety aspects. And we can deny those permits if we feel that it's not in the best public interest, if it's going to cause congestion issues and other challenges. I know this was a concern, especially at Goose Rocks Beach, because of a lot of the short-term rental licenses that are there. We, again, think that the parking in Goose Rocks Beach is extremely limited. So that's going to be a barrier if someone was to try to have 250 people, hypothetically, that trigger that mass gathering permit. They're not going to be able to get the parking necessary to have that many people at a house. That's quite crowded. So there's definitely some enforcement mechanisms we have available to deal with that scenario if it does arise, but we have not seen that in our past experience. And then if the property knowingly advertises as a wedding event venue, that would be a violation of the land use ordinance. That's the town's position on this, and especially if there were no approvals in obtaining a permit or planning board approval as a conditional use, we would enforce that to the greatest extent possible.
Okay.
So, their growth planning members asked us for a breakdown of the parcels in the town. And so, I guess right now, do you want to open up questions? Because I can go to the breakdown of the parcels, but what I want to do is Nadia has the GIS map, and we have a special query tool that I can show you, highlight in real time. This is how many parcels we have, 5 acres or less, or if you want to see certain zones, we can play with all of that to get you a better sense of what you think would be appropriate place or what other performance standards you'd like to see moving forward. So I'll leave it open with you all.
Yeah, I do have a couple questions on the last
Yep.
one, though. Just because I don't recall the numbers. So mass gathering, it's 250?
Yes.
So if you have 248, you're all set. You don't have to apply for one, right?
Technically not, no.
Okay. And then tent permit, how big of a tent would trigger that?
I forget the size requirements. Normally when people get them, they're like the event tents that you see, like 20 by 50, I think, around that size. Normally it's any tent, but that's done through the town clerk.
Okay.
They get an application, and people do it all the time, birthday parties, weddings, or
Sure,
just for their family and stuff, they want to put one up.
Yep. No, okay. It's just good to know those numbers. 'Cause
Yeah,
people will look at it and say, okay, what if I don't have to do either one of those?
right.
Right? Then I don't advertise. But it just happens every other week.
Again,
Right,
a
it's-
residence could, people like having pool parties, and you could have, just your family over or friends, and you just have those barbecues, and
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, we don't regulate that. Unfortunately, but if we see knowingly that you're getting compensation, that's where we can have,
That's the piece. I mean,
Yeah.
if they have that many friends and they're having that many parties,
Right.
good for them.
yeah. I
But-
think I'd get tired of that many people, but some people are more people persons than I
Yeah.
am, so that's fine.
But if they're doing it that's a commercial business under the
Mhm.
radar, that's obviously the concern. Okay. You guys have any other questions?
Have these issues been a concern in the past?
Which
The whole
issues?
business of people having loud, raucous parties frequently on their property, disturbing their neighbors. Is this something that's been happening, or, because I personally haven't, in my 5 years here, I haven't noticed
Yeah,
it.
no, I would
Yeah.
say I haven't. but-
Just trying to anticipate problems.
We have received a few, especially abutters, where, there is maybe a wedding that's going to occur or something. We do get some complaints. And when we do investigate it, most times it's just a family that they're looking to they have a nice property and they want to have their niece married on their property or something, and it's one night. It's not a habitual thing, but, we do get complaints, and and the police department does as well, off hours.
No, but there haven't been habitual uses like this, I assume.
It hasn't, and we do have sound pressure levels as well that control noise. So if people are after, the normal quiet hours after, 10 o'clock, then the police department does go out and investigate it, so. Most people are we haven't had ones that we had to go get legal action involved. Most people are compliant, they understand that, okay, my music was too loud, I need to turn it down.
In a situation, when I lived in Massachusetts, people 2 doors, large tracks, a couple doors down, I guess, very loud party, I called the police. All the guests were state troopers.
Oh, wow,
Nothing happened.
it makes for a fun time. Okay, so at this time, we will show you the map, and we might have to zoom in at certain parts. If you want to see a certain part of town, just let us know. So I broke down each of the acres by 5 increments, because I think that's just helpful to see how many parcels we're dealing with here. And so the first one is if you had a 5-acre minimum, which is what the state requirement is, besides the 2,000 gross sales that have to be farm-related activities. So anything in orange that you see there with the orange boundaries is any parcel that's over 5 acres. So those are 274 parcels that are in those zones referenced here. You'll notice in your memo that we did not include Dock Square, we did not include the riverfront zones, and that is because those properties, and in Goose Rocks Beach as well, because Goose Rocks Beach, we're not dealing with that in this scenario, because that's a commercial use and we can't allow that commercial use. So this is just those other parcels that are in town that we've done analysis on. You have 274 parcels that meet that criteria.
So, looking at that, it looks like everything has orange lines around it. I'm not quite sure how.
Yeah, if you zoom in, you can just zoom into a neighborhood. So you see that there's white.
Oh, okay.
So those are ones that are under the 5 acres, the criteria. Does that help?
Right.
Okay, so if we move that, again, and tell me if you want to go to a certain area of neighborhood, or if you want to see a certain zone, we can also filter by zone if you want. So if you just want to focus on farm and forest, can you add that filter just to show them?
Yep.
Let's do that. So see how it just cuts everything down, that if you want to just focus on a certain area, we can do that. Okay, so you remove that.
Just for example, say Rocking Horse Farm, is that in Farm and Forest? Is that in the,
Can we type that one in?
Pretty sure.
Off of Rundle.
can we zero in?
Yep.
like, closer to that, just so we can see?
I think
And
it's
that one is,
PH.
is that more than 5 acres?
Let's see.
Or more than, oh, these are
Yeah.
greater than 5, of course, yeah.
So it looks like it is in Farm and Forest.
Yep,
And is that 15 acres?
that's over 5. If you want me to filter it, I can,
That's,
Okay, so these are all that are over 5.
yep.
okay.
And I can go up each step if you want to see, like,
These are all parcels, so.
Yep.
I don't know, they may own maybe 3 or 4 parcels, I have no idea.
Right, okay.
and that it's common for farming, and you'll notice as we go up, you'll notice there's a lot less, because farmers traditionally have multiple parcels that are right next to each other, but they're not all combined. And that, you know, that could be a challenge for, you know, just thinking about that, what would make sense for the area. Let's go up to 10. And can we remove the farm and forest one? Just so they can see how we keep getting less and less. So again, we just cut down a whole bunch.
Can I go to 15?
You go to 15. So at 15, we go down another 80 some, so we're down to 118 parcels in town.
When you say in town, you mean still the farm and forest?
This is just all collectively in those zones. If you look at the memo, that has
Yeah.
all the, so if you zoom in, can we go to, let's go to Rocking Horse again to see that. So they are no longer over 15 acres at that point.
So, and I don't know which one is,
Go over the green.
Right there, so if you
See-
zoom
see
in,
the green?
there's the green.
Oh, I see.
There's a little green symbol.
Yeah.
Like a marker, a little green marker.
But hover over that other orange parcel that's right next to them. I was just curious if that was owned by them. No, it's not. So again, they would have been excluded if you did a 15 acre.
but they
Minimal.
could have 15 acres based, but have it be smaller parcels adding up to 15.
Well, we just hovered over, that's not
Yeah,
owned by
These are
them.
parcels that are.
Yeah, they only own the
15.
one.
They only own
Yeah.
that
Say
one.
I don't know how many, they only have one? Okay.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Some farmers may have multiple parcels.
yeah, some might have,
So they may end up with 100 acres of land because they own, I don't know if they do.
but it might not all be attached to, because
No,
that
no.
happens.
But they might have 25 acre parcels, for example.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't show up in the greater than 15.
Well, greater than 15, it would show up.
Yeah.
Greater than 15.
But if they're all small
If they had
parcels-
25 1 acre parcels, you're right, it
Yeah.
wouldn't
Right,
show up
right,
in
right.
the.
It wouldn't show.
Right.
Yep. So after 15, we go to 20, and this shaves you down another 30 some, so that you're down to 88 total parcels in all those zones that we mentioned before.
You want to know an island?
Hmm?
An island.
Oh, Goat Island, yeah.
Goat Island.
I didn't count Goat Island because I'm like,
Okay.
that's not a contract, so we're not.
Be a good place to have
Ship them out there.
a farm event.
So at 25 acres now, you're now down to 73 parcels. And again, you can see where most of them are located. I'd like to zoom in to where North Street is. So if you zoom in there, because this is in the village residential zone, this area. So one's the golf course. The parcel that's right there, 12,518, that's Blueberry Hill Farm. That's owned by Jane Morgan. And that's right abutting the village parcel that the town owns, right to the south of it. And I don't know what the other one is, has the, what's that one? Francis McCabe.
They have,
I think there's a wetland there, if I remember
Is that
correctly.
McCabe's? Citizen?
Francis McCabe?
So there's one along that, what
So that's
street?
School Street?
That's School
Yes.
Street.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's opposite of the school on that.
I think that's a wetland, put the wetland layers up, I wanna see what that does. Do you have the state one?
No.
That one. Okay, there's all the wetlands that are,
What is that? Is that water?
so those are wetlands. So the dark green is a forested wetland, the light green right there is a freshwater wetland, which has a lot more protection measures in place for it. And this is approximate, it's not, this, you need a wetland delineation to give you a better sense, but it gives you an idea of the area. So yeah, that's the. So if we go to 50 acres now we have it again, and anything greater than 50 acres, there's 32 parcels that meet that criteria. So you can see we shaved it down again. Mostly it's where the old town forest was. A lot of those lots which don't have connectivity to anything, they're just forested lots out in the logging trails. So,
And
you want us
there's
to
one
focus?
over there on the right side near the ocean, or is that near Goose? Oh, that's further north,
right there?
on the right side, far right. Over. Yeah, right.
That one? That's the Rachel Carlson.
Oh,
That's federally protected, so you're not gonna have anything there. That's owned by Bob McGrillis. That's in private hands.
Do you have, is there a layer on here that's conserved land?
Yes, we can add that. That's a good point.
Is that in our town
No,
ones? or-
state.
Oh, I see.
So there's all the conserved land in town. So if you zoom in to where the Adams is, do you see that one? Where those
Here?
parcels are? Yeah. You can see that there's now a different color
Mm-hmm.
to help show this is conserved. So that 25.32 is conserved.
Is
Right?
not
No?
conserved. This one's conserved.
Oh, yeah, there it is, the conservation district.
the darker color is conserved.
Yeah, darker is conserved.
With the green line.
Yeah, a little green. Hard to see it.
I'm colorblind, I can't see that, so
Oh,
that's.
I don't see the green line.
It's
Yeah, I see
dotted.
the dash
Yeah,
marks.
it's
Yeah.
dotted.
Dash line.
I think it's green.
Yeah, I'll take your word.
But I guess there's no reason that a conserved land couldn't be a farm,
They can't,
working farm.
they wouldn't normally,
It wouldn't normally, but.
yeah.
So of those 32 lots
Mhm.
that are greater than 50 acres, how many are not conserved?
I did not break that down.
I mean, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Like 15-ish?
Yeah, so it looks like about half of it
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah.
What is rule?
So I have a couple of questions. When we spoke last meeting, were you suggesting that we also address what zone we would want to see the agritourism or agritainment exist in?
Yeah, that's why we brought this here, that if you wanna focus on certain areas, we can filter by zones. If you wanna look zone by zone to see what makes sense, we can do that, yeah.
So as I looked at this, as I was preparing for this, I was looking at the farm and forest section,
Mhm.
based on language that seems to be within the comprehensive plan. And if I look at this and I look at something that's maybe greater than 50 acres, that would mean, according to this, there would be 17 locations in the farm and forest zone that would accommodate the agritourism, agritainment.
Yeah.
So, I guess when I started to look at this a little more carefully, I wondered about, having been on a farm that was 45 acres at one point, it's actually quite small. It seems like it's a lot, but it's actually a small area. And I'm wondering, by the time you have something that's at least 25 acres, and I'm really looking, if it was greater than 25 acres, that would mean there'd be 45 parcels in the farm and forest that would accommodate the additional use of the entertainment. And then if you upped it to 50 acres, then you've reduced that to 17 locations. And as I was looking at the area, that seemed to be, I was questioning whether or not, what would be the impact to have 45 possible locations versus having 17 possible locations, and have that determined by the size of the parcel. So that was one of my thoughts of how I was looking at that farm and forest area. As I looked at the language from the comprehensive plan, it looked like people were saying, in response to what their vision was for Kennebunkport, is they liked passive use language. They liked that definition of passive use, and that passive use would be minimal stress on the site's resources, provide ecosystem benefits, highly compatible with natural resource protection. And also, so when they were asking about what was important was rural character, peace and quiet, interacting with nature, and natural preserves. So as I was thinking about that, it made me wonder if you had an event that perhaps was 50, on a location that was 50 plus acres, then you could possibly have, you'd have a lot of traffic that would go there. You'd have to have accommodation for the parking, and then you would have to have an ability to put in structures, even if it was a temporary structure. It's not, when you think about a hayride sort of situation, they cut the field and they use the tractors and the horses and they do what they need to do. But with something that's maybe a more permanent entertainment, this idea of agritainment is new. It's a new terminology for me. I'm more used to the agritourism. But with the entertainment, that might be something that has more frequent occurrences. And so I was concerned about, when we are talking about locations, picking something that would perhaps accommodate, a higher use and impact the interest of the people when they talked about natural resources, et cetera. So that was just something that I wanted to throw out.
No, I hear you, because, the reason why the one at the farm's working now is that the traffic is being managed by a local hotel,
Mm-hmm.
right? So,
And again, she's going to be coming in to talk to you on April 1st.
so it's handled the traffic issue.
So that way you guys can learn how they are operating things. And they limited how many events they could have for the concern of the neighbors and the impact, which I think, it's appropriate, keep guardrails in place.
Then, so what do they have for the number of people that use it?
So for theirs, it is less than 50 people in attendance. Acoustic noise only, so no amplified music. And then I believe it was 8 events a year, if memory serves me correct, that they could
So
have.
that would be pretty much in the summertime, so 2 a month.
Right.
So let's do that. Let's filter out the FF zone.
You want to put that back?
Yep, put it back in as a subsection. And then let's zoom in. So
Do
these
you
are
want me
the,
to take off conserved land?
oh no, keep it on, because I want to see how many parcels are not developed that are within the farm and forest. So out of those 17, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them are conserved. If I'm reading that correctly. Or 8 or not.
I think 8 or not.
8 or not.
The orange.
Yeah. So you'd have 8 parcels that would not be in, that parcel right there, let's hover over them. That's the electric utility railway. I don't know Paul Murphy. James Steele Living Trust, I believe that was just transferred for a single-family residence. Oh, no, right there, Match Huckins. That one is a single-family residence off Wiley Road. Schmidt Family off Guinea Road. And Burgess. Margaret Smith. And Ruth Fernandez.
Is there a distinction between what is forest and what is farm in those, on the larger parcels and the greater than 50? Because so often the greater than 50 could be timber as opposed to farmland.
Well, if you pull up the, let's pull up the satellite image now, because most of those are timber lots.
Okay.
Okay. What you may want to do, Nadia, is go to the layers section, and there should be a transparency tool to, yeah, right at the state data. You see at the very top of the state data, there's a knob.
Oh, this one?
Yeah, that one. You could just bring it down a little bit, that way you can see it. So again, those lots are all forested.
Okay. So would you then be stepping back to the 25 acre to accommodate farmland as opposed to timber? Would that be the proposal?
We can take a look at that. Put the let's just show a little bit of the state data. Okay. So if you zoom in to this one, that's conserved, I believe. That looks like it's farmland right there. And that's conserved. So that wouldn't, I mean, most cases, when they have conservation easements, they don't allow any kind of commercial development on the parcels, generally speaking. Depends how the conservation easement was drafted, but that's generally the case. It has to be related to, yeah.
So would we want to maybe not limit it necessarily to certain lot sizes, but just limit the number in the town?
I think you would limit how many events they have. I think that's an appropriate,
A number of events
Guardrail.
anybody has, or allow only permits to so many owners?
yeah, I think we run into maybe some constitutional issues with that. I'd have to talk to the town solicitor. If we say, there's only this many, 5 total venues that can, or agri-tainment that can be in the, there's ways you can do it that it's fair to everyone, like you're not picking winners and losers with this. You're saying, look, it's this acreage size, this is your limit on what you can have. It's a lot less discriminatory than just saying, we have 5, and so the first 5 to come in, you get to do it, and the rest of them.
Sorry.
Okay, I was thinking that's what we do with, when we allow building permits, we say there's so many.
We don't limit building permits, we limit growth permits, and that's for a specific policy provision, that you want to limit growth in certain areas and allow growth in other areas in town.
But
Yeah.
we limit the number of,
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's allowed in state law. So state statute allows towns to have growth management permits in place to protect the health safety of the community, because we want it to look this way or grow in this manner. So state statute allows us to do that. State statute, I don't believe, gives us the right to just say, here's how many you can choose from, and
but does it deny the right?
it doesn't. It's something we can talk to the attorney, but I'd be more cautious doing that than just saying, here's our parameters, and this is the reasons why. We think that, this is a reasonable acreage size because of normal farms in Kennebunkport are around this acreage size or greater. So things that are less, yes, you're discriminating them, but you're also putting in place that you're saying from a policy perspective, these are active farms that we think.
Do we know how many active farms there are? I mean,
We gave you that list, yep.
7.
but those are,
The 5.
The 5 that
The
we've,
5.
It's far that we know about.
that's the best that we know of, and that's if they,
I mean, people could be farming their land and not be registered or
Absolutely,
using the,
yep. And people could have livestock that, meet that definition of, maybe they have a couple pigs and they butcher them and then they sell it to their friends and stuff for food. But if they don't have a local sign that says I'm a little butcher shop or whatever, that I have this,
Yeah, I don't know.
it's a permitted use, we wouldn't go around
Right.
regulating that.
Well, they also may not be selling it, they may not get to
Right.
that $2,000.
Right.
So one of my concerns was, when I was looking at this and trying to think in terms of the parcels, one of my concerns was that if with the 5 that are currently listed here, they are active farms right now, and if there was a limitation of acreage that was proposed, if they didn't meet that, it was wondering about whether or not that particular parcel could be grandfathered so that they don't lose their ability to farm as they have been doing.
They'll always be able to farm, they won't be able to do those other, the
The
agritourism and
agritourism.
agri-tainment side, they will not be able to do that.
But they're using it now as a means to perhaps enhance their income. And so would that be a hardship to them?
I would think we'd try to avoid doing that to them if we could.
Mhm.
And we can zoom into those parcels and you can see how many acres they are, so you get an idea.
But not all of these places are doing agritourism or agri-entertainment
Right.
now. Like 5 Acre Farm has a farm stand, but that's just like a farm stand.
Right.
So.
What-
So of
And
the,
maybe there's a difference we consider for agritourism versus agri-entertainment.
You
Right?
can.
It's more, agritourism is supposed to be more farm-focused, educational purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I would have less concern on a smaller farm, where you're doing something like that, and there's, 5 or 6 people that are going there to learn about farming as part of some
Yeah.
week vacation they're doing, right?
And I think it would be good to clarify
Yeah.
what we're talking about. I was a little, between agritourism and agritainment, and I think you're right, you have different property rights may be associated with one versus the other. And that
Right.
might be a protection to those who are currently
Mm-hmm.
using that.
And agri-entertainment's for something that's a little bit outside of what normally you would see at a farm,
Yeah.
right? 'Cause that's how I got those two definitions.
Yeah, there's two uses.
Yeah.
Tom, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what the committee actually does. And I'm trying to relate this to my experiences in business at GE Strategic Planning. We looked at big businesses and all the markets, the opportunities, the competition, anticipated regulations, all sorts of things you try to bring in and develop a coherent plan for your business unit that would take it 5 years, every year review it and do a 5-year plan, et cetera. And I'm trying to, this to me seems like it's more, I used the word maybe more ad hoc than really an overall plan. Are we trying to work towards the plan? I don't recognize plans change as soon as you have the plan drawn, it's out of date already. Are we trying to do something now that we can look at as a blueprint for the future? Are we trying to just solve problems that come along, given the current, I guess, attitude of the people in the town and the state regulations and so forth? That makes sense to you? So what are we actually trying to do? Respond or proactively develop this vision for the future?
Well, I think, you make a point, so, the town has the comprehensive plan, which is our vision. That's our planning document of what we've decided collectively as a town, that the voters have enacted this vision, this is what we'd like to do. And then we do have to address, when we start seeing trends or things that are occurring in town, this is where we have those conversations, these policy conversations, on where we'd like to see this move forward, or maybe we don't move forward with it. And so, right now, what staff has noticed is there is a trend that is occurring of agricultural operations or properties that are looking to supplement their income or their revenue stream with these types of events on their property. And we don't have, as staff, a good use to put this under. And so we need to decide, do we want to allow these uses in our town? Do we think this is appropriate in these areas based off the vision for the community? and then send this to the voters? Or do we decide, nope, we don't think this warrants any more attention, we don't think this is gonna jive for our community, so we're just going to let this go?
But are we trying to integrate, I guess, the various and often conflicting objectives of the people in the town?
Yep.
You know, the people who want to use their home, their land for some sort of commercial enterprise, or maybe some private activity, and the people who want to go full bore and develop this whole thing into an industry, or the people who want to lock the door and let nobody else in. So how are we going to, I guess, juggle those different competing, goals and objectives? for
That's the
people?
challenge, that's the challenge.
Well,
'Cause
that's-
even in our comp plan and the vision, it has conflicting, right? Where affordable housing and at the same time conserving land, right?
Okay.
So it's a mix, right?
So eventually trying to come to that, recognizing that plans change, or dynamic and not static, we try to come to some kind of point we can say to everybody in town, here's our vision for the future. And it's our plan, not this committee, but it's our plan, and we're going to change it as we need and as people want. But this is what we're gonna do as a community
Yeah.
going forward.
Yeah, usually, I mean, the plan's been set, and you update it every 10 years is a normal flow. Doesn't mean, if we made a change, we could make a change, it would have to go back to the state if it was substantial enough,
Mhm.
to have them review it and make sure they were comfortable with that change. We haven't done that in the past. Normally, what we've been able to do is because one of the other things we'll do is any land use ordinance that's gonna be changed, whether we're the ones driving it or one of the other boards comes up, planning board comes up with something they wanna change in the land use ordinance, it will come before us to be reviewed to determine whether or not it is consistent with the plan, right? Because that provides some value in the legal sense in court, where you have a comprehensive plan that's approved by the state, approved by your voters, and your land use ordinances are determined to be consistent with the plan. It gives them a little more validity. Doesn't mean that you're always gonna win, but it gives them more validity.
But
if you
in
get
doing so,
challenged.
we take into consideration all the input of the various, let's say, interest groups in the town.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then, as Galen said, what occasionally happens is we see trends that are happening, trends that we either didn't recognize when we put the plan together,
Mhm.
back in 2021, 22, actually 19, 20, 21, a long time. But are now something that are come up, and we don't have a mechanism to really cover them. So so now we want to look at how do we do it so we provide a mechanism, it's somewhat like the short-term rentals, or the rumor actually is probably a better one. Right? There was a trend seen where there were folks who were either widowers, who had lost their significant other, now they live in this big home, and they would like to be able to rent a room for some additional income. And that was only allowed in a couple places. And it didn't really make sense why it was only allowed in a couple places. So we ended up, and we had a lot of discussion with the public, but we ended up writing a rumor ordinance that allowed people to do something like that, to provide some income, and they could stay in their homes. Right? So this is sort of the same thing. How do we have said that we want to promote agriculture, right? Just like we want to promote fishery, right? So how do we do things to help support them do that? But at the same time, guard against other folks who may see it as an opportunity for a new business, agri-tainment, right? And come in and set up the Ferris wheel and all the rest, all the things that bring you there, every day, right? Which is not what we're trying to do. So you have to kind of watch the two. And there are really people that figure out the holes between all that to get what they want, so.
So I like this is, I think, a great example is in your comprehensive plan. I'm going to read to you your vision statement, where it has these different tension lines that are really playing at each other. And so our community, where's that here? As we adapt, we will preserve Kennebunkport's historic integrity, protect our natural resources, strengthen our unique small town character, while improving economic vitality. And so that is pulling on multiple facets here of where the community wants to go. And that's part of policymaking, is we're going to have different stakeholders that are going to have different interests or visions that you all have to discern what's in the town's best interest moving forward. And there's no right or wrong answer to this. That's,
It's all a balance.
yeah,
So,
it's all about it.
so can I ask you, are you getting any sense of a state directive on agritourism and zoning ordinances within towns? Or I believe in New Hampshire, it said that, towns cannot restrict
Mhm.
agritourism, but there is a definition of agritourism. Are you getting any sense of that at the state level?
I'm not. I know there are some towns that do have agritourism definitions at the local levels, that people are realizing this is a thing. But at the state level, I think there is some insurance addendums that are in there to, like, again, give
Yeah.
greater protection from if you have agritourism type on your farm, like liability wise. I know those have been explored, but I'm not sure about any other state level effort.
I think there was a concern, it passed the New Hampshire legislature, that they did not want to have local towns saying no to
Right.
that anybody who was currently doing farming, you could not say, no, you can't do this additional level of.
Yes, so from the state of Maine, we do have the right to farm legislation that does protect farming operations from nuisance complaints. And so there is a section in our town ordinances that we do need to look at some point for animal husbandry that might be in violation of that. But again, it wasn't something we've ever looked at. I don't think it's been really enforced. There was this huge concern, to give some people some broad context. Commercial feeding operations, they called them CAFOs for short. It's where you had a lot of animals on a small property, and there was concern about factory farming. That's what they call it. There was concern about that, and a lot of towns, in response to that, have created ordinances that said, we don't want this, or we're regulating this. And the states have pushed back, saying you can't regulate a normal agricultural operation, which could be feedlots, it could be these large things. And so a lot of these community ordinances were stricken down, or they were removed if they were enforced through the courts. So that's something we have to be careful of. Farmers do have the right to operate as long as they're operating at the state level and they're following their pollution, manure management plans and all other state plans. If they are operating under the state guidelines, we cannot regulate them more extensively than what the state already has on the books. Again, we do have some provisions, but I don't think we're enforcing it, so we're not in any huge water trouble issues right now. But we need to address that moving forward. The other one is right to food. That's the constitutional amendment that was recently passed by the voters of the state of Maine. That allows people to keep the non-commercial keeping for their own self-sufficiency. And I do think that this is a trend that we're going to see if the price of eggs continue to stay as high as they are, that people, as they did in COVID pandemic, I saw this in Presque Isle, people were buying chickens and they wanted them in their backyards. We can create some sort of guidelines for that, as long as they're, again, not onerous and we're not towed out not allowing it like residential areas. You can't just blanket say no. You can put parameters that are for the health, safety, and welfare. That is certainly our parameter as a home rule town. But that's something that is a trend that is shifting that we need to address, because we don't have rules for the non-commercial keeping of livestock.
Thank you.
Yeah. But agri-tainment and agritourism, no, I don't see that trend right now.
Okay.
Yep.
Just wondered if there's, sometimes you have to be aware of the language that somebody else is higher up
Yeah.
is using.
Well,
We have to take it into consideration.
So we could decide that we don't want agri-tainment. We could just say we don't want it, right? And then we could allow agritourism.
You could.
That would be okay.
Yep. Again, right now with Black Rock Farms, they are under a restaurant use because they're in the free enterprise zone. But if the farm was located, let's say, did we say the Rocking Horse was in, what zone was that in, Farm and Forest?
Yeah.
So I don't believe in the Farm and Forest they allow restaurants or hotels or the like in those areas. And so if they wanted to do that, that'd be a tough sell, in that, if that property wanted to be used for, you know, agri-tainment
Okay,
purposes.
so I was thinking, if we didn't do anything along here, we just said, well, let's keep things the way they are, that would mean that they could do whatever they want to do.
No.
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 We'd have to still find the best use, best supplemental use that we can. So what is close in your, because we don't have definite language that says, this is what it is, code office has to do an interpretation of what is the closest best use that would fit in that parameter. So what we did in the case of Black Rock was we realized that restaurants and the hospitality industry historically have hosted weddings and events. That's just, when you customarily think, those are the closest that we could get to. And so the code officer said, okay, apply for this with the planning board, because it requires conditional use approval. The planning board could have said, no, we don't think this is appropriate, and shut it down. But they found that there was reasonable guardrails in place to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the residents next door and the character of the community, and they did not have any issues with it.
And I forget now, so they were doing weddings there?
Yes. Weddings and like, well, it was weddings and like the rehearsal dinner beforehand, because it's only 50 people, so it's a lot smaller gathering. I think Nonantum was still going to have the main wedding event on their premise. So the thought process behind that was, we're going to shuttle all the people from the Nonantum to the farm. So it took care of the traffic concerns that people would have had normally. We took care of the amplified music, which was the noise concern, and we limited how many events they could have, which addressed that concern. There was no proposed new structure for the site. They were going to use temporary porta-john that were like trailers that were brought in to deal with the waste management side of things. So everything was very temporary, and it was only for that season. And that was reasonable in the eyes of the planning board.
And it's carried on for how long? Is that how
Indefinitely.
many years? Indefinitely?
As long as they continue to want to operate, as if they cease to use the use for more than a year, they would have to go back to the planning board then. So like, they say they took a year off.
So do they have a limit on the number of people? that
Yes.
they can? It's
50, yep.
Why is it 50, not 100?
The applicant decided, and the planning board decided that's a reasonable number. That was the,
Can I ask, in the, on the website, it talks about, let's see, ideal location for intimate gatherings and also corporate team building activities for
Mhm.
both large and small events.
mhm.
So,
Yeah, it's not just weddings, it's also if and again, I think April 1st, you'll get a lot of questions answered by the actual farmer, and she does a really good job, I think, including nature and the agritourism, that focus of making sure people understand about the events on the property, pest management, all that. She'll go into great details with you, but it's an educational thing as well, yeah. And she was using her existing greenhouses to host people, so it wasn't like wasn't a bad concept, and maybe she'll give us a tour at some point, but that was, I think it's a sustainable way to address the existing use on the property. It was accessory, it's not like it was taking the center stage, she still has seasonal workers and still does the farming aspect. And neighbors I was surprised that there was a lot of neighbors that expressed support. There's always those that are concerned, but there was a lot that expressed support because they did not want another subdivision. They'd rather her continue to operate that as a farm, not to just sell it and then break it all up into houses, so, yeah.
And as a farm, what can they add? I mean, I assume they can add a farm stand,
Yep,
right?
yep.
So
Could they, I mean, like up the road there, don't they have like a cooking school or something over in
Crinkle
Arundel?
pod?
Oh,
Yeah.
see, I don't know.
Yeah, but that's small numbers of people. I mean, I don't know, is that regulated? Did they do that? I
That'd be
mean,
in Arundel.
See, anything that I
It's in
think,
Arundel too.
yeah, I think once we get into that commercial aspect, like if they want to do demonstrations, that's more the agritourism side.
Right.
It's related to it, like learn how to can. Like that's a a great skill for people to learn. And those types of workshops, or, I would think that would be something that's in addition to just agriculture. When you just do agriculture, you're just raising the animals or growing the crops, and that's not really what you're doing with agritourism. Agritourism is more activity-based, you're doing stuff.
They have a good website. I had a look at Black Rock, and on the website, it has a little video. And so also they have their language on the website is, for them, they include buying locally, conserving land, using organic practices, and reaching out to members of the local population through education. The soil, the animals, the birds, the insects, the plants, and the people should be able to coexist, and then they go on with that. So they give a picture on, of what Black Rock Farm is. It didn't say how many acres it was, so I wasn't sure how large a farm.
Maybe we have that.
And it may not be one parcel, so
So we have friends whose son is living in South America,
Ah.
and they are on a coffee, I guess, plantation. And they have people who come, but I don't know how sort
36.
of official it is, but
Okay.
they come and they'll stay for a period of time.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
as part of
Yeah.
staying there, they're working on the
Yep.
plantation and doing all that sort of thing.
So that's something else to think about, that aspect of it, which is something that I partook in both in Spain and in Poland. 2 months on a dairy farm in Poland, and then 2 weeks in a wine harvest in Spain. Like, that is, more people are starting to do that. That's another trend we're seeing, is that aspect of learning about the local agricultural operations is something that is drawing people, especially younger people, to learn about where their food comes from.
Right.
So do we have any language talking about overnight accommodations?
No, and that's something that I think it's worth having that conversation about agritourism. I would say it's more agritourism at that point.
Right.
It's more the educational side of things. But how does that, it's a conversation we can have, how does that relate to short-term rentals? Because that's a different bucket that we have versus our roomers on the site. So those are all conversations we need to think about. It's all tied together. Good thoughts. Black Rock Farms is 36 acres,
Is that it?
and she
up there?
does not have any of the abutting ones, is that right? Because
Because I don't think so.
I think she did sell a lot of the wooded lots.
Is that the larger piece of it?
Yeah, it's that yellow outline.
Yeah.
Those are all,
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
that she owns any of the abutting.
so it's just that parcel.
So that leads, then my concern at the beginning, where the lot size, was that something that would be the criteria? And so, looking at something like that, you're now looking, really wanting to accommodate, if you're going to have a limitation on the acreage, you've really got to consider what you're accommodating, what use.
And I think you did say somebody would check with the abutters. If we're going to allow something on the property, the abutters are all notified.
Yeah, it'll be a conditional use, so all conditional uses require notification to abutters within 200 feet for when the application was submitted, so they know, hey, it's been submitted, and then they'll also get a notice when the application's found complete, and they schedule a public hearing. The abutters will know about the public hearing. At the public hearing is when the public will be able to speak. So I always have to stress that, because a lot of people, when they get the first notice, they show up to the meeting and they want to speak, and the planning board does not hear that until after they found the application.
And what if one abutter objects?
So the abutter may object, but it has to provide substantial evidence. If the applicant has made a complete application, they struck all the criteria that we require of them, the abutter is going to have to then show the burden of proof of why that application is in violation of the ordinance, or how it's going to cause a detriment to health, safety, and welfare of them or their community. And that's a very high bar to meet. You can't just say subjective language of, well, I just think it's going to cause an issue with my home value, or you know, I think it's gonna stink, or you can't use vague language. You actually have to really prove that this operation is going to be a detriment to your ability to enjoy your property. And people do hire environmental scientists, they hire sound engineers, they do hire experts, and if those experts do offer testimony and the planning board agrees that that's sufficient testimony, they could say no. But it is a high bar. It's like a quasi judicial role that the planning board sits in, that capacity to hear both sides of the argument and then come up to a decision. It's all in their findings of facts, which can be appealed to a higher court, so, yeah.
So it would be good, excuse me, to get what the acreage is for each one of these, just so we have an idea of the existing, at least the 5 existing farms that we know about, what their minimum acres.
Okay, so we said Black Rock's 36.
36.
Let's go to that list.
And we can't, this is not going to impact people who are raising hogs to feed themselves and things like that.
No, no,
Okay.
I mean, their agriculture, we're not getting involved
Okay.
in that. It's if they just want to do any sort of those types of
Entertainment.
events, yeah.
Okay,
So we said that's 36, and then
This is the
Christmas tree.
Christmas tree
the
farm,
Christmas
right?
tree one is, how many acres is that one?
9.7.
So that's-
Beechwood and North.
So I call it 10, I guess.
And I think don't they own the abutting parcel as well? I think this is one where it's split between, to the north, that parcel to the north. Nope, the Aroostook County one. That one.
Yes.
Yes, that's owned by the same farmer. How many acres is that one?
Six.
That's 6.
so you're talking about 15 acres.
Yeah. Rocking Horse was what, 25, I think? Or was that less?
7.
Scroll down. Oh, okay.
It's 7 acres, did you
Yep.
say?
Blueberry Hill, I think, was over 50, if I remember correctly.
They don't own the other parcels around it?
No, they did not own any other parcel.
Oh.
Nope.
That's this. 31.
31 for that one.
And it's 5-acre farm stand, 5 acres?
Great question. Is it? I don't remember exactly where that one is.
Bryant Lane?
I just typed Bryant Lane in. There you go.
Is this one it?
That's their stand, yeah.
Yep. She in surrounding ones?
She must. This was only 1.5 acres.
Yeah.
1.5?
1.5.
So
It's not 5?
1.5, yeah.
so that sounds like an
That's just-
agritourism.
That's just a farm stand.
It's just a farm
Yeah,
stand,
yeah,
yeah.
so-
It doesn't seem like she owns any of the abutting
Yeah, I
acres.
don't see
She's
that.
doing
I
that
think it's
one.
further down the road.
They have great pies?
No.
Oh.
Wait, what?
Different person.
Pies.
Oh, really? Good to know. I'm always
But
looking
she has
for
good, she
pies.
has good stuff, yeah.
I mean,
Is
she
that
might
the
use the
farmland over there?
land. I don't know,
Right there.
but
That's owned by, who is it owned by? By Lois Bryant?
What is
I
it?
don't-
Lois Bryant? Or Louise Bryant? Who am I saying?
That one, those owners, all that land.
Okay.
But again, there might be people that have, you know, other livestock that we just don't have record of, or they don't apply for the exemption. I know Tim Spang in town, he raises livestock, but that's not on this list.
Yeah.
So there's people in town that maybe.
So they'll be interested in this too.
Yeah.
So there are farms in town that just, they don't apply for a permit, or then they don't need to.
They don't need
If they
to.
want to
Yep.
have this tax exemption.
Yeah, they want to do
Yeah.
something different.
And if they don't have like an online presence or something we can't find, besides knocking on every, because some people, they just own farmland and then they rent it out to another farmer to take care of, so that's a common practice too. Tenant farmers,
Yeah.
someone else owns the land.
Could I ask you something that's a little off this beaten track? My thought was, as I was looking at the map, that of the green area up here, the forest and farm, that it abutted Biddeford and Arundel. And I thought it would be great to have conversations with them. We're interested in open space, as people are in the, in the comprehensive plan, to talk to neighboring towns and say, are we all interested in maybe doing as much as we can to keep this area, a larger area of green or natural resource or anything along those lines, corridors?
Mhm. So there was a conversation, you weren't here last year, I brought this to the growth planning committee. In the comprehensive plan, there's a strategy mentioned about the Biddeford Kennebunk vernal pool complex and the need to really work together with Biddeford on adding those protectors for the aquifer as well as for the entire vernal pool complex. And so that's something that we are still in the early stages of drafting, of trying to really preserve those areas, because they are all connected.
Oh,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
I don't think there's a joint open space plan between, I've seen that in other communities, but this town does not have one with other towns. Yeah.
I think there's a strategy that would
Yeah.
develop that. So it came out of the plan,
Yeah.
because we know we didn't have one, was, over the next 10 years, I forget what we set for a time frame, but to develop a strategy with Biddeford to how to address that.
Okay.
It doesn't need to be addressed, or what is it? Okay, so at the next meeting, we would have a visitor from Black Rock Farms.
Yep, so on April 1st, you'll have Black Rock Farms here, and you can certainly ask her any questions about her current operations, what she's thinking for the future, and I believe Nonanta might even be there with them, just to
Okay.
like help share both sides of the story of how it works. Again, I thought it was a innovative approach, that it's not, stepping out of the box of too much commercialism. It
Yeah.
was offering a new experience for people, and I think that's what's gonna be explained to you, is it was offering a new experience for people who are staying in Kennebunkport to see that it's not all just coastlines and the picturesque what we think of. There is a lot of beauty inland that we have to share with people who are visiting in town, but also helping the local residents be able to pay their property taxes and live in Kennebunkport.
Well, the advantage too, it's gonna have a minimum impact,
Mhm.
right? Because they're not putting any physical permanent structures in, everything's temporary. And there won't be that much vehicle traffic either, but there's gonna be the small bus going back and forth, dropping people off, so. It's when you have to find parking for 50 people, that starts to have that. And they got a gravel parkway and all the rest, that you can start impacting that area, right?
Mhm.
So how do we, this certainly could work with other hosts down in down there, Dock Square and so forth, in their hotels, motels, bed and breakfasts, whatever they have.
Yeah, they might like that.
Mhm.
But to have it singularly out there,
I mean, so then what do you do for like next steps? I mean, we're gonna talk to the people from Black Rock, but how do you sort of put restrictions and allowances?
Well, that's where you guys give us feedback on what you think, and then we'll draft
Yeah.
it,
And
and
then
then you
you
guys
put it
will look at
together.
it
Yeah, so
and
it's-
say yay or nay, and then we'll go to the next step. Sort of like we did with the stormwater. So, we did an education session, we brought Maine DEP here, for Tom and Ann. We brought Maine DEP here, they did a good education on low-impact, design standards and how it all works. And then we asked for feedback, well, actually, no, the board asked, give us research of what other towns are doing, we gave them that research, and then they said, we like these things, and then staff drafted it, and we're still going back and forth on it, so. Yep.
Wow, great.
That's the process.
They take a while,
Yeah, they do. Yep,
but that's okay, because
Yeah.
it's deliberate,
it
Yeah,
is.
right?
yeah,
What you have to guard against is the unintended consequences.
Yep.
That's what I always worry
Right.
about, right?
right.
It sounds like a great idea, I think it's wonderful, get more people to the town, educational and all the rest. And then something happens you didn't anticipate.
So we always do the best we can.
You can't undo,
Yeah, right.
right?
We always look for the unintended consequences, but we also need to realize that the land use ordinance is a living, breathing document, and
Yeah.
it will continue to be shaped by you all and the town. Years to come as new things, new technology, all kinds of stuff, trends happen, we need to keep up with it.
Right.
And that's why we're here.
Yeah.
Job security, right? Okay,
So thank you.
yep. So just think of what questions you would want to ask the
Yeah.
farmer for next meeting. That's the homework.
Okay.
And that will be on April Fool's Day,
Yep.
so no April Fool's questions.
No.
And I'm likely gonna have to be remote
Okay,
for that, and also for the third meeting.
okay. And if,
Actually, the third meeting might be more difficult to be remote, because I'll be in a different time zone, and I'll still be at work.
okay. And if you have questions, please do not hesitate to send them in advance so I can
Yeah.
send them to the farmer. That way they have, if there is something they have to research or something, it would be helpful to give them notice.
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't we try to do that, like, by the next, well, let's say next Tuesday or next Wednesday.
Yeah.
So we'll try to get them in, give them some time to answer.
Yeah.
It'd be a good idea. Doesn't mean we won't come up with some during the conversation, right?
Yeah.
It'll trigger a thought. Okay. All right, any other business we need to discuss? Hearing none, take a motion for adjournment.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye,
All right, thank you very much.
thank you.